We're back. Another episode. Nothing's off the table. I have a good friend of a friend here. His name is J-Mack. He's from Boston.
Boston area.
This is the first time I will ever be in a room by myself with someone wearing a Boston's Red Sox hat. That's a whole nother conversation. He was connected to me through Frank Parisi, who was on the podcast a couple episodes ago. Really good guy. Been through a ton of adversity, also in recovery. And he spoke very, very highly of you. And it wasn't even a thought as to whether or not I should have you come in or not. And we were talking a little bit offline. I don't know. I know the very broad story of Jay. I don't know the nitty gritty. I don't know the details. This is going to be the first time that I hear everything. And I kind of like doing that. It's organic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Nothing is pre-screened or pre-questions or anything like that. It's what we see right now is what we're going to get. And I really appreciate you driving all the way down here today, bro, to come share some hope with the people and the listeners. Without further ado, J-Mack, bro, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Shout out to Frank for hooking this up, and I've been looking forward to it. And even the little bit that we did speak before we, started shooting, I like that it's, organic like that. When I was saying Boston area, most of my childhood was more in Malden, which is about 10 minutes outside of Boston. And then as I got older, I lived actually in the city. So, but yeah, it was quite the long drive, and I was joking about wearing green the other day, but I did have to come with the Boston hat. But in all joking aside, this city has always inspired me since I was about 12 to another level as far as music and just as an artist. There's the energy that New York City has is like no other. My aunt lived out here when I was younger, so I used to come out here and visit, and it's always inspired me artwork-wise when I go back home. And I just showed you that picture I took, and I was like, that was pretty cool picture, man. And God's good. I'll say that. God's good.
Definitely. So where'd you grow up? What was your childhood like?
I mainly grew up in the Malden area, and my childhood was pretty dysfunctional. Single mom. My mom had me at 16 years old. Her and my dad split fairly early, but his side of the family was the tight Italian side. So my grandmother really was like more the mom to me. And, so on the weekends I'd be with the Italian side. And then during the week for school, I was with this, an untreated addict, we'll put it that way. So I seen a lot of chaos at a young age, a lot of drug use, a lot of men pretending to be my dad. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Just didn't really have role models. I had people I looked at that I didn't want to be like. And with that came a lot of freedom. So I was exposed to a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't have seen, and a lot of just freedom on the street and just no parental guidance whatsoever, and with that came a lot of, seeing drugs, seeing drinking, seeing domestic violence, I know it wasn't right, but I was scared at a young age because I seen men put their hands on my mom, and that just.
When was how young were you when you saw that first?
My first memory of seeing, domestic violence and just chaos was probably like 6, 7 years old.
Wow, young.
Yeah, so I have a little brother, Josh, who's 6 years younger. So, when I was 6, he was a newborn. And very shortly after that, I became the living babysitter. So, just lots of chaos, lots of... Viewing it now, what it is it was a lot of untreated addiction and alcoholism. And still to this day, a lot of those people have never even taken a look at being accountable for being an addict or an alcoholic.
Yeah, that's unfortunately that's a lot of people, We're some of the lucky ones. How did growing up in that household, how did you survive?
That's actually a really good question. I survived I kind of escaped out in the street, and I basically used the freedom that I had as a kid, and that got me in a lot of trouble. I learned to steal young. This is actually I've never shared this story on like a podcast or being recorded. I have one time for a magazine. When I was 8 years old, I stole my first item, and it was whiteout,
Hmm.
right? And no one showed me how to steal. And I remember, like it was yesterday, looking to the left and right, knowing like, all right, I need to get away with this. The funny part is when I stole the whiteout, I went directly behind the apartment building that we lived in and I wrote my initials.
Hmm.
I wrote JM with whiteout. That story was almost in the back of my head for quite a few years when I was younger. And I remember it popping up and was kind of, I don't know if anyone relates with this out there, but I thought of the story and kind of got excited because if you see what my career is now as an artist, I was like, holy shit. The fact that I wrote my initials, it was like a way of attention, which makes sense as I got a little bit older when I found tagging, which is my first drug of choice, which was adrenaline, not, the tagging, but adrenaline. I started to write my name everywhere. And the reason why I did that, looking back in hindsight, at least why my opinion of why I did that, is I didn't have a voice at home. I told you I was a scared little boy. There was men that would my mom rolled with bikers. And so I just seen a lot of chaos. And I started to be able to write my name and basically create an alter ego out in the street by writing this over and over and no one knew who it was. So there was an excitement of, you know what I mean, feeling important. And that started off with the graffiti and having access to the street and freedom. So
When you said you were how old when the first time you stole? 8, right?
yeah, so I was 1988.
Wow. And kind of how did that transpire into, your high school days, and what did high school look like for you? And when was the first time you ever took a drink or a drug?
Well, so first stole something at 8, and then that turned into knowing that my dad smoked, right? So I would visit my dad. My dad was kind of there for me when I was younger. I say kind of because I never lived with him when I was younger. But when I'd visit, it starts to make sense when you're like, oh, that smell, right? It's the weed. And I started stealing weed from him. And the first time I ever took a drink was with a friend of mine that I started actually tagging with. And, we drank a little bit, got drunk. The typical feeling, like, oh, we're just being, rebellious or whatever. And that escalated pretty soon after. I don't really have a story of like drinking and weed for a long period of time. It escalated to hard stuff as early as 15, and I had a deep, deep, scary feeling of anxiety and fear. And I would not admit that until I first got into recovery, which is, years later. But that somewhat masked it, which most addicts and alcoholics, I feel like, in my experience and all the years I've been in recovery, relate with. You finally took some kind of a substance and it was bearable to deal with what you felt internally.
Yeah.
And with me, it became more, and it was mixed with the lifestyle of, graffiti and just street stuff. And I dabble with selling drugs. I don't got this Scarface story. I like doing them too much. So I don't have a story of selling them much. I always did them. And it went hand in hand with doing drugs, doing graffiti, in and out of the system young. I got caught doing Green Line trains in Boston when I was 16 years old. And I got year probation and like a 1,500 or 1,000 hours community service.
Jeez.
It kind of went light on me because at 95, they actually turned graffiti to a felony, believe it or not. And, so that's where it transitioned high school, where I moved in with my dad. So me moving in with my dad was like having a roommate, not a dad, so the drug use escalated because he accepted the weed. So like a good addict that we are, if I'm allowed to smoke weed, we know we can manipulate with other things. And it escalated very quick. I went through the party phase. I went through the clubbing phase. I went through all that stuff. And then like most people, where it got me as far as like, oh, I've arrived. And I don't like to glorify it. Like I hear sometimes people speaking and it's almost like they glorify it. Where I will go with that is the first time I did opiates, I said, I don't care if I ever touch anything else that I've touched up until that moment. It made me think I was more creative. I was more talkative. I just didn't have anxiety. And, being an artist and then also doing opiates, the ultimate lie that I've been saying for years that I told myself, other than when we say, oh, just one more, was I'm more creative when I'm on drugs.
What was the first opiate you tried?
I think it was Watson 357. It was Vikes. I worked at a computer company in high school for a short period of time. And these guys were like 4 or 5 years older than me. And they didn't like ask me. I kind of got nosy and was like, what are they, getting into? And funny story with the first time I ever did opiates is that the thing that I drew, which I spent about 6-7 hours on, ended up in my senior yearbook. It's literally, I just doodled a whole page, and in the middle, which is weird to look back at now, there's a girl's eye and she's crying, and then it's all black and white. So it's almost like I was crying out, because at 18 years old, which is the first time I took an opiate, very shortly after that, it got ugly, and that's the OC80 era. Late 90s, OC80, and that it just kind of wiped out most of those people that, I was affiliated with back then, or even going to school with, or hanging back then with. They're not even alive anymore.
Yeah.
And it escalated real quick to IV heroin use.
Did you graduate high school?
Yes. Barely.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that I graduated the high school that I went to solely because I was not good in school. I barely showed up, was flunking, is that a lot of my family members also went to that school. So, the principal and certain teachers, and I did a lot of art for the school. And I feel like they kind of just gave me a diploma.
Yeah.
I graduated by the skin of my teeth.
By the time you graduated high school, you were heavily addicted to opiates?
Yes. That was 1999. I was doing opiates regularly.
Wow.
Yeah. And my graffiti career was between that and the drug use. I just was an absolute mess,
Were you making money from doing graffiti?
No.
It was just an expression of art and kind of what you were passionate about.
Yeah, it was back then. I never looked at what I was doing in high school and a few years after as something that I would pursue as far as a career to make money. I almost looked at it as like selling out, right? It was just this kind of like false narrative in my head, like, oh, you'd be a street graffiti writer and all this shit. And I didn't really even try to paint murals or anything like that. It was really just what you see when you take the train. It was just literally about getting up over and over and just getting your name out there. And ultimately, looking back at it, it's my artwork has always reflected the way my life actually was going. So when I was younger, it was very chaotic, track sides, trains, freight trains, and I traveled a lot back then, do graffiti all over. And it was chaotic. There was nothing positive of it, and that went on up until 2003 is the first time that I ever attempted, to try to get off drugs. 2003, I was 23 years old. I had just gotten out of barber school. That was a battle. Didn't have grades to go to college, had no desire. But the barber world, something that fascinated me even when I was in like middle school, high school, that I want to try that. There's something about making other people look good. When I'd go into the barber shop, it just, to me, it seemed like a cool job. So I pursued that. I went to barber school, And I have no idea how I graduated. We were boosting out of stores on lunch break during barber school to keep our habits going. I one time robbed a store on lunch break, made it back for school, and then we got high after school. And then it was the same thing the next day.
You were shooting heroin at this time?
Yeah, it escalated to, by the time I was 21, so 2001, and God rest his soul, my friend Nick, so I was with, they say it's disease is progressive and fatal, and it is, and my story proves it, that during my drug addiction, there's certain periods where certain things scared me. Certain substances scared me. Shooting up, the thought of that scared me. All the way up until that it didn't. And what it did for me is on a certain day, like many addicts I've heard, seen, and experienced, I was sick and I was with friends that were going to get high, but they weren't getting OCs. They were getting dope. And I remember clear as day that my conscience knew if you go this route, you are never turning back. But the other voice was like, you're sick, fucking send it. And I was so naive to that I had no idea how to even stir it up, cook it up, none of that. At 21 years old, my first time shooting heroin, I put my arm into the front seat of a car with two of my friends.
Wow.
And I can tell you that when that happened, that's probably the closest ever to anxiety, fear, insecurity, self-loathing, shame, neglect, abandonment, all those great words that I've experienced as a kid were fucking non-existent. And the chase was on. You know, I like I just said, at one point, this scared me, that scared me, this, and then it became a daily. What once scared me now became how I survived every day.
How long were you shooting heroin for?
3 years straight.
It's crazy you say that because I talk about with friends and stuff all the time, like these invisible lines that we draw in the sand in our addiction, or when before we come into recovery, it's like, I'm not as bad because I never did this. It's not as bad because I've never shot heroin yet. And then as you keep progressing in our illness, which like you said is progressive and that's factual, says in the book, never gets better, it only gets worse. Every time I went back out, it only got worse. It never got better. And the line that I drew in the sand got pushed back further and further and further. And the consequences got more severe and more severe and more severe. And I was an Oxy user. I was a Roxy user. M30s, my favorite. And I was doing 30s a day at one point. And, you know, I never shot dope, but I have all my best friends are IV heroin users for the most part. And they say the same thing. Started with Oxys, OC80s, this one, that one. And I'm never going to shoot dope. And then the money runs out or the habit's too expensive and they go to shoot heroin and they all say the same thing, that shooting heroin was the closest I've ever gotten to that euphoria and those feelings of neglect, abandonment, shame, guilt, you know, self-pity or not feeling good enough. Like they all just dissipated. And like you said, the chase is on from that point on.
Yeah, and the thing that's scary, like looking back at it, is that once my addiction progressed to that level, who I was willing to use and be around, that circle got smaller, right? Because I told you during lunch of one of the days in barber school, I had one kid that I went to school with that would get down like that, where you could go and boost or rob a store or whatever, you know, there was just little things. And then that's increasing. Now what you're doing to get money is now escalating. And my opinion back then, I started to be, almost embarrassed where I'm like, I'm now full-fledged shooting heroin, right?
Yeah.
At a party, oxys were almost accepted at that point,
Yeah.
at least in the circle of friends I was with. Once you're now boosting every day, and you got to pull out works, and you're now living like pretty grimy. There's also a part of me that said, this isn't going to end well. So every day it was like you didn't know where that was going to go, and, catching cases. And it just, thank God, my story, I have no bids. I've caught in cases or was in holding or, weekends or overnight, shit like that. But I never had to go to prison. Been in programs and whatnot. But once I went that route, I never thought that I could be happy unless I did that. And that went on for a fucking rat race of a few years, like to the point where I couldn't even go with friends and drink and smoke and do other drugs because the opiate addiction trumped all of that. I wouldn't even find happiness unless I was high, and the artwork, the graffiti and just artwork and all that stuff started to kind of subside. I was really only doing like wild, I've painted spots where if I fell, I'm dying. Climbing up on billboards, because now this is just going hand in hand with, it's basically like a dopamine. You're chasing dopamine, whether you're stealing to get the drugs or doing artwork on the level that I was doing. It was all like this recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
And I was going to crash and burn. And I started hearing at 22, 23 years old, friends started either getting sentenced to pretty lengthy bids. Friends were dying. And then I started hearing about detox, and to me it was foreign. I didn't know what it was. And pretty soon after that, my mother found my needles hidden in a jacket in my closet.
How did that go over?
It's kind of funny how that went over. Now it's funny. So I told you, me and my brother are 6 years apart. So I was 23, he was 17. And we were having this huge party at my mother's house. And I had no idea when she was coming home. And my mother's pretty fucking nuts. She's a project chick from Chelsea. So she's left the projects a long time ago, but the projects haven't left her. So I was like, I'm getting out of here. And he decided to stay and have the people in the house. Well, when my mom come home, she snapped and he, he rolled on me. He basically said, I know that Jay was shooting heroin. And looking back at it, he ultimately saved my life. I was in detox 3 days later. And that started my journey with at least having some people enter my life that were trying to help me, whether it's a facility like detox or holding, or just someone in a professional manner that's trying to help me get away from me. From 13 to 23, I had used nonstop, a decade of progressive. I had overdosed, the drugs had escalated, friends had died, friends that my mom met that were at the house died, Yeah. It got real. So that was my first attempt at recovery and just trying to even get clean. It was 2003 at 23 years old.
What'd your mom say to you when she found the needles?
I was at a friend's house. It was 3 or 4 in the morning, and I had, we were still partying, but I had left my house, and she called me, and she basically was like, get the fuck home, and the reality of that situation, looking back, and I know a lot of addicts that I've spoken to over the years, when they get confronted or their drug addiction is fully out in the open now. Now, I was scared. I was nervous. I didn't know what it looked like. But there's part of me that was somewhat relieved that some people knew. Like getting high every day and shooting heroin, putting a needle in my arm, I just felt fucking worthless, man. But there's always been a part of my spirit that's known I'm supposed to be doing something more than that. And in that moment, someone intervened, and my brother helped me. He really did. And then looking back, as angry as I was when that happened, looking back, I'm his older brother. We didn't have a dad around. We didn't have role models, so he's looked up to me. And that started the journey of starting to be like, you know, we got to combat this, because that's really what it is. I mean, detox and meet-ins and recovery, it's really just combating how I think.
Yeah.
That's been my journey. It's the thinking, you know. Because the truth is, I came into rehab at 23 years old with a drug problem, and at 45 with almost 9 years clean, I stay in recovery with a fucking me problem.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been about drugs in a long time. It's not about the specific substance, you know. It's just it's not with me. I have an issue with me.
What was your first experience like in detox?
I joke about this. So I didn't know what to expect, and the two dudes that I was roomed with were literally contemplating leaving, and I think they had fucking $60 between them. You know, and I didn't know what to expect. But what I can remember is that when commitments come in and when they would hold groups, because your first 2 days where I went to detox, and this is a long time ago, your first 2 days were optional as far as groups or commitments. You could literally stay in your room.
Yeah, because you're kicking and...
Yeah, and I don't remember even taking advantage of that, or not taking advantage. I don't even remember being interested in staying in my room by myself, right? I wanted something else.
Yeah.
I wanted a new life. I didn't know what the fuck that looked like. But when commitments come in, and looking back at some of the staff, they cared. And I wanted to hear something. And looking back, it's kind of funny because they gave you methadone back then. So the first few days, I'm smoking butts like crazy.
Yeah.
And then those last couple days, the reality check was I wanted to be clean. I wanted to stop having to rely on substances every day. I've been relying on them since I was 13 years old. And I went to a holding after that, which is a 30-day minimum until you get placed into a halfway house. And the kick was brutal. That kick was absolutely brutal. Wasn't sleeping. But people would come in and they would shit, and I wasn't interested in all of them. I know it sounds judgmental, but I was a 23-year-old street kid that had just been shooting heroin every day for the last 3 years, and prior to that, drugs. So I almost needed some people. I needed to be captivated by some people that did come in that had they were really good with words. And one guy that stands out that really helped me, and he's a friend of mine to this day, was Louis Diaz. He ran the program. And at the time, he had like 4 or 5 years clean. And I watched this man be able to take, there was 80 to 90 guys in this place. It was like a pre-release. And I watched him speak in a way where you could hear a pin drop. And that's pretty impressive to have 80, 90 guys. And you know that not everyone wants to be there. Some are there just to not be homeless. Some want to beat a case, whatever it is. But that was the first seed, we'll say, that was planted where I was like, this looks attractive. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what this guy's story's about. I just know that some of the stuff he's talking on, I can relate with. So this beautiful thing called hope, which sometimes comes from someone just the way they talk to you, the way they look at you, the way they care and ask you how you're doing. And I got that from that man. And
what was he saying to you that made you feel that way?
One of the main things that sticks out is I had this photo album that I still have to this day that I was telling you before we started shooting, that I've been documenting a lot of graffiti since I was a kid. And one of these particular books has, New York graffiti, Connecticut, Boston. One of them's mainly me and my boys. And I had like a few of us was sitting over my bed looking at it, and he come in and he said, "You did all this?" I said, "Well, not all of it, but most of it. Me and my friends did it." And he said, "Man, you're really talented. You did that with spray paint?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You should really do something." Like, it wasn't these crazy profound words, right? But it was, he seemed like he genuinely cared and was like, you shouldn't just be out tagging. You should do something with that. And that planted a seed. So at 23 years old, that's the first memory where I could see thinking, all right, if I'm not going to do drugs and I'm going to be in recovery, and your life's supposed to be positive, and you're hearing from people that your life's supposed to get better. I started thinking, maybe I should go all in with the art, because I had always wanted to paint. I'd always wanted to do portraits, and I always say this. That's why, so one of my favorite sayings is don't wish for it, work for it. And for a long time, I used to wish I was clean. And I used to wish I was in recovery, or, wish I had a dad, I would wish all these things, right? And when you just sit there and wish, to me, that's putting in someone else's hand. But when you work for it, you put it in your hands. And I started working at it, and I started drawing a lot, and I started, just trying to do the artwork and the graffiti, but in a positive way, and I can thank Louis for being the first person that I remember saying, you should do something. And one of the most powerful things he did, so you used to have to get up at 6 a.m. at this place. And anyone that knows when you're kicking or you're newly clean, getting up early sucks. He wanted me to paint experience, strength, and hope on these benches. And he's like, I can't pay you because you're, a resident in this program, but what would you want for, I said, how everyone got to get up at 6? He said, yeah. Excuse me. I said, I want to be able to sleep in. I don't care even if it's only till 7. He said, all right, bet. So that was the deal. So I stayed up every night until these benches were done, and I did experience, strength, and hope, and I did them in a combination of Old English mixed with graffiti. And the cool thing about those benches is it took a while to complete them because I had to use paintbrushes and markers. I couldn't use spray paint. But that basically taught me to be patient. Because I'm used to doing graffiti, right? The thing with graffiti is you're doing it with spray paint. It's very fast. You're doing it on the fly. It's illegal. Now I had to put some time in on, and those words mean something. Because the cool thing is when I got out of that program and I had stayed clean for a little bit, I came back to do a commitment with a couple months clean, and I sat on those benches as a guest to speak to the guys. And it said experience, strength, and hope. So that was the beginning of starting to do something positive with the art, because I have a passion to create. I don't think the talent was God-given. I get that a lot. People say, if I could draw or paint like you, I'd do it, but that's a God-given talent. And I think that discredits what I've done, the hard work I've put in, and the passion to create has always been there, right? And then over time, the passion to create a message. There's something about what we battle with when we go through things, at least my opinion on this, when I go through things in life and you come out on the other side and it was tough and I didn't think I could do it and I have this negative narrative, but I prove myself wrong. I like to give back and share those stories. To me, that's creative, right? This isn't always just about telling my story from beginning to end. I don't even like to actually speak like that much, like just descriptively from using to now. I like to kind of have like key notes that are very important. And one of the biggest things is I'm very passionate about recovery and helping addicts because, yes, in turn, that helps me. But sometimes people out there just need to know that this is actually possible, even though their head says it isn't. Because that's the difficult thing about this, right? There's a negative narrative in our head with our voice, and you believe it. At least I do.
This half my brain's selling bullshit. This half my brain's buying it.
Yeah, and then the thing is that I'm really big on, I've never been able to combat my negative thinking with just outthinking it positively. The only thing I've ever seen that's worked to this day and still does, even this morning, is positive forward action. So when I'm thinking negative, with all the knowledge I have and all these things I've done in the world, it doesn't matter. I still have to do something about it today. That's why I get up and go to the gym. Most days I'm grateful that I do want to go to the gym, but there are some days I don't want to go and I still go anyway, right? Because then you feel good about yourself. I'm battling something that constantly talks to me in my own voice. And no matter what I've accomplished in life, no matter what my art looks like, no matter what kind of shape I'm in, no matter how good the relationship is, no matter what the house looks like or what I'm driving, there's literally something that's still always kind of talking shit to me. And I don't get to just sit there and say, Jay, let's not think like that. I gotta fucking apply pressure. But I apply pressure in a positive way today. And it's not always just the gym. I still go to meetings here and there. At one point I was in meetings every night, service positions, speaking at conventions, doing all that stuff. It's a little bit, not as busy in the 12-step fellowship world now, but I still be going to meetings because for me, they work, right? When I go to a meeting or even something like this, when you connect with other humans and talk, my spirit is full, especially when you talk about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, either one of us or whoever out there, you could grab your phone and Google addiction. It's going to say the opposite of addiction is connection. I've added a little something to that because the opposite of connection is disconnect. And I've only found myself using when I'm at a disconnect from my spirit. Because I've known right from wrong my whole life. And I know a lot of people relate with this. I've literally known right from wrong my whole life. It's just that a big chunk of my life, I liked fucking around with the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Right? It was like a dopamine kick. And I liked stealing and this lifestyle stuff and, you know, straying away in relationships and just I had lived a very unspiritual life. And now when I'm in tune with doing what I do or speaking, whether it's a podcast or a group, when I'm speaking my truth, it usually helps someone else understand that they're not the only one that suffers from that. You know, to me, that's the beautiful part about recovery. It's an evolution of self that we do with others.
It's one of the main reasons why I wanted to start this. And the other reason why is because I come from a Italian household. My dad's family has been ravaged by addiction. My mom's family, no knowledge of addiction. Two very different brains. But one thing I can say is that addiction has a stigma. It's always had a stigma. I think today it's being broken, right? It's gone from those people are losers, junkies, whatever the fuck you want to call us, to now these people are sick and we have to help them. And going through what I've gone through, bro, I've had to come to understand that I am sick. Like you said, I am sick. And my problem today isn't drugs or alcohol. My problem is me. That's the only thing that's always been my problem. I'm my own worst enemy. I get in my own way more times than not. And then the only solution when I live in me is to drink or use. It's the only thing that'll turn the mind off, you know? And like you said, when I go to meetings, I went to a great meeting this morning. I didn't want to go. Bro, you just feel so good after. You feel like, wow, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. And there's someone that told a story today that I knew and I hadn't seen since college. And I'm like looking at this kid, I'm like, bro, I mean, this kid should have been dead 10 years ago. He's got 10 years, a little over 10 years. I got, you know, a little over 2.5 years. I had to do some more research and development before I stayed. It took me 10 years to get 1 year. A lot of relapses, a lot of in and out, a lot of half my way, half AA way, or half my way, half the other way. I know you mentioned to me that you had relapsed at what, 8 years?
Yeah. So I, you know, just discussing the first time detox, went to a halfway house. I completed the halfway house even though I shouldn't have. And what we'll say is I got away with using. I really didn't get away. We don't really get away with shit. We know what we do in life.
Yeah.
But I graduated that halfway house, and very shortly after I was back drinking, and, you know, fast forward, it was like a year or so after, I found myself back in treatment in 2005. Same detox, same holding. Now I see that guy, Louie, that I told you was a mentor, and I'll never forget, I'm walking through the facility and he sees me and he thought I was there to do a commitment. Like he was literally happy. He was happy to see me regardless, but he thought I was there to speak. And I was like, nah, man, I live here. And he was like, he made me feel good. He goes, oh, now that you're here, I'm going to put you to work. And I started, doing some artwork again. And this is where my life, this is where recovery, this is the hit. And when I do speak this part of the story where, because for me, there's a difference between abstinence and recovery. And I had just been clean before, but I can be an asshole with a clean date. And my experience shows it, right? And some people told me some shit a long time ago, and it's true. If you do not change who you are, your clean date will change. And I always wanted to fuck with that theory. Like, I'm going to be the guy that proves that wrong. And no, I didn't change, so my clean date did. I come back in 2005. I go through that program. I started cutting guys' hair, and I didn't care if they had money or soups or cigarettes. I just cut their hair to make them feel good. Some guys were getting a visit from a kid, and you'd see a guy that's got nothing. And I started doing up these fly birthday cards, and I started doing the artwork, like I said, right? With a purpose. Create something that helps someone else feel good. A haircut makes a guy feel good. The conversation with the haircut made the guy feel good. I started paying attention when commitments come in. Now I sat up front. See, when I was there before, I'd sit in the back with the kids from the neighborhood, right? Now I don't give a fuck. I'm sitting up front. I want to hear it, but not only hear it, when you're up front, I feel a part of. Just like you said, you went to the meeting, you feel better. You hear a message, you end up seeing a kid. That's the connection piece. It's not just a word I use. It's true. It holds weight. Went to a halfway house. I'll never forget, they sit you down, and if you're the new guy, you got to introduce yourself. And I kept it short and sweet. I said, I'm Jay, I'm an addict. I've been clean before. I'm not going to sit here and bore you with a bunch of words and what I'm going to do. I just know what I got to do. I want to get back to meetings, my men's meetings, some step work. And I was like, and thank you. And I remember the staff kind of being like, kind of giving me a nod. Like that was like short to the point. It seems like you're serious. And I put 8 years together from that moment, from 2005 to 2013. I stayed clean, but not only did I stay clean, I did all the stuff I wasn't interested in before, you know? Got a sponsor, did the step work, went to men's meetings. What helped big time back then too is my ex-girlfriend that I was with for years back then was also in recovery. And she was like that with the women's program and sponsorship. And just in my experience, if there's going to be a relationship of two addicts, they got to have their own recovery.
Yeah.
And then it becomes this unity. So 2013, I'm now single. That relationship had ended a year or two before. And I just went down this path where barely going to meetings, not connected. Yes, I'm clean. I'm living unspiritual. A lot of chaos, a lot of drama. Last time I checked, drama don't just appear at your door. You fucking around and find out, right?
Yep.
And I had been saying for quite a while leading up to that, I've done everything around here but use. Looking back, it was like, all right. And I'll never forget, man, I fucking picked up at a nightclub with my friends. They're not in recovery, but they definitely, a few of these guys were truly my friends, and I'll explain what I mean by that. When they realized that I picked up and drank, a couple of them were actually really pissed, and they're not in recovery, and your friends don't have to be in recovery. They just knew, Jay don't drink. You just went 8 years.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about progressive? After 8 years in recovery, not just abstinent, recovery, once I got a buzz, I went up to my boy, dead ass excited, and was like, yo, are we coming here next week? And I'll never forget his face. He's looking at me almost like scared. He's like, we're in the club right now. I was like, I know, but are we coming here next week? And he literally was like, bro, we're in the club right now and it's midnight and you want to just confirmation. I just needed this dude to be like, yeah, dude, we're coming next week. That's like fucked up.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how much recovery I had. Within those next few months, I had progressed to doing cocaine and drinking. I got into a high-speed chase on Revere Beach, which is right outside of Boston, with a friend of mine. Right? We're leaving the strip club one night. I'll never forget this. He's driving. I'm in the passenger seat. I'm probably texting a girl to meet up with after. And I hear, oh, fuck. And he swerves and I look up. He almost hit a cop. The cop was outside his cruiser dealing with another car. I don't know if it was a sobriety checkpoint. I don't know this. I just know that it was a cop. And because his cruiser was, I don't know, it wasn't too far, but he had a run to it. I said, go, go, go. He listened, thank God, and took off. He got that thing up to about 100 miles an hour. And at the end of Revere Beach, there's a rotary. And I was like, cut there, cut there. I was like, he was actually listening to me, which was good. Once we got to the side street, I go, park this fucking thing. Because now you can hear the sirens coming. And now we're on foot. Those cops swarm that street. I'm in the back backyard of a house right by where he parked, just minding my business. And I'm like shitting my pants like, yo, if these dudes come back here, they're going to fucking hem me up. They're going to know I was part of this. They're searching the car around the neighborhood. I can hear the distinct brakes of like these cops, right?
Yeah.
They end up leaving. I go back out. I'm looking. We start making our way. It took us an hour to get back to his apartment, but we made it back on foot. And the next day, right? This is the fucked up part of the story. 8 years clean, relapse, couple months later. Now we're getting into it. We almost hit a cop. Fly, park, ditch the car. And the next day I wake up and my ego kicked in. I was like, you got away. Because my whole life before with using, I have lots of different chase stories from doing graffiti. And it does. It feed the ego because it's like this cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
And very soon after that, that same friend, I was actually thinking of this story the other day. That same friend, a few weeks after this incident, we're going out to the strip club one night in a club and driving in Revere, down by Northgate. It's a certain area of Revere. And this lady nods off at the wheel, crosses the median, comes at us head on. He cuts the wheel at the last second. She T-bones the Jeep that we're in. So it hits me. Adrenaline kicks in. Thank God when this lady passed out, her foot wasn't on the gas. So she was probably going like 30. It's still fast enough.
Yeah.
But I got the brunt of it. This is how progressive alcoholism, addiction, whichever way you want to word it. When the cops came, the fire department, we're fine. They take her off in an ambulance. The car's drivable. He goes, we'll just bring it back to my house and we'll get your car. We get it T-boned and we get in this car. It's drivable, but it looks ridiculous. And we drive it back to his house, right? And we get in my car and go out for the night. Now, here's the scary part about this. My adrenaline and just being drunk and everything, I'm thinking I'm fine. I wake up the next day after this accident. I can't lift my right arm. Like I can barely get it up like this, and I have to paint something. I had a job I had to do. This is the scary thing with drugs and alcohol. I remember going up to my mom, who's not really aware of recovery and just what it's about. And I begged her, like, oh, I can't move my arm and I have to get this painted. She was like, oh, Auntie gave me a couple painkillers. I was like, I'm going to need those. And she gave me those. And it was off and running after that. And now it became a daily thing. And I don't know if you relate with this, but I know some people do that have had time and have relapsed. Once you know, you can't not know. So now to have had 8 years before and recovery and knowledge and my life was good, and now to be strung out on opiates again, that was the battle of the soul for those next couple years.
The worst. Because you know, it's not like you're even in, before you taste recovery, you don't know recovery. So you're just like, this is just the way it is. But then when you get recovery and then you go back to it, you're like, bro, this is not enjoyable. I don't want to be doing this, but I can't stop. But I need to stop, but I can't stop. Tomorrow I'll stop. And then you go through the withdrawals. You can't kick by yourself. So you're just in prison, bro.
Mm. Yeah, it was this so it was this back and forth battle. 2013 relapse with 8 years clean, and I was in and out. I got a couple stints. The most I had got was about 10 months relapse. One of the times I had 90 days and a girl I was dating. It was a short-lived thing, but that ending and a friend died. I went, fuck it, went back to drinking. In and out, in and out. The tragic thing that happened in my life that catapulted me back in 2016 was a dear friend of mine, Greg King. Used to come to the barbershop every week. He was a once-a-week guy, every Friday. 4 years clean, working down Mass Ave, helping addicts off the... Still to this day, the numbers that this kid has is ridiculous as far as getting people into treatment off the street. Every Friday, dude, he'd come to the shop. And it was pretty often he'd say, Jay, we miss you at the men's meeting. You know, he's like that one friend that didn't give up. You know, there were some friends, they didn't give up, but they stopped coming to the shop. And me telling the story now, I can understand why they did. They didn't want to see me using. And they're addicts in recovery, so why would you want to see a friend using? But Greg said, we miss you at the men's meeting. You know, and that shit used to kill me because that men's meeting meant a lot to me.
Mm-hmm.
That was my home group. That's why I became a fucking man. Like, I came into fucking recovery, man, as a young street kid, punk-ass boy. And actual recovery helped me become a man. And someone near and dear to Greg had passed away, and he was supposed to read the eulogy at her wake. This is the tough thing about addicts, man. When we have a slip or we use and we have time and we are looked at as a pillar in recovery, we feel like we can't be honest. And looking back, dude, the guilt that Greg must have had killed him because he ended up getting high another time before that wake, so he never got to read the eulogy, man. That was November 2nd, 2016, and he had an appointment in my barber chair at 4 p.m. that day. And that was one of the loneliest fucking 45 minutes until my next appointment came in because, you know, I got the call from my little brother that Greg had passed. And, you know, I remember sitting in that chair and, you know, that motherfucker lit up a room, man. He was funny. He was a funny fuck. And there's people that found out that day that he passed that only knew him from the shop and started crying on the spot, man. And sometimes an addict's eyes close for us to open ours. And I said, I'm fucking done. Like, I've known I was done, but I needed something. I said, I'm gonna come back. I gotta come back. These next 2 days will be the next days I use. That's literally what I said. You know, his wake was on a Monday. And I went to that wake, man, and I had taken like Suboxone earlier that day and a piece of Adderall, and fucking waited in line for hours with all these people I love and care about that love and care about me, man. That is one of the most gut-wrenching days I've ever experienced because I had to hug people waiting to go visit my friend in his casket. And I hugged some of these people. I said, I'm coming back. And I started crying. One of my friends said, nothing grows without water, son. That made me ugly face cry right into his shoulder. And, you know, I went up to Greg's casket and I was like, bro, I'm going to come back for you. Well, what's fucked up is the next day, without even thinking, I got high one more time. And like they say, be careful who you judge. Because I used to always judge people I'd see get a keychain high. I don't do that no more. You know, God works in mysterious ways because that Tuesday, which was the day after his wake, that meeting that's held on that night is the first NA meeting I ever went to. And I went to that meeting and I got up and got a white keychain, man. And the gut-wrenching feeling of getting the white keychain and seeing people in that crowd that I had helped get clean, that I used to sponsor, and, you know, the ego was tearing me up. But I got up anyway, I got that. The hit is the very next day was now that men's meeting. And I went there one day clean. But Greg wasn't there to welcome me. You know, he'd been saying, we miss you there, we miss you there. And I got my hand up and I cried and I was sweating. I was super uncomfortable. And I've been back since. That was November 9th, 2016, man. And there's a reason why I talk so much about relapse, because most addicts, not all, some people I know have gotten clean off one shot, and that's fine. Hold on to your seat if that's your story. But relapse is a huge part of my story and a huge part of most addicts' story. And I'm kind of here to speak I don't mean here at this podcast, but I just mean in life in general and what I do now for work and travel and speaking and run groups and work at a treatment center and all that stuff, is that all the heartache and despair and pain and tragedy, I fucking own it and I go at that shit nowadays and I talk about it, because the thing that takes its power away is by talking about it. No matter how much I talk about Greg, I'm not bringing him back, but I tell his story because he can't tell his. You know, so I'm grateful that I can still talk about him and still tear up, because I don't think that's ever going to change. You know, and I don't want my clean date to change, so I keep working on me and I keep telling his story, and his story helped bring me back. And then that's going to help another addict come back, because we need to hear shit. You need to hear shit. You need to go at your emotions. You need to be able to be vulnerable as a fucking man, because I didn't look for watered, cut down shit on the street, so I don't look for it in recovery. I want the raw emotion. I need you to tell me how it is, you know, and I'm grateful that I've stuck it out this long, because this time around surpasses my last time as far as what I feel. You know, I'm not minimizing what I accomplished, but where I'm at right now in life, I'm grateful that I stuck it out. And I'm grateful for people like Greg.
I love when you said sometimes an addict's eyes has to close for another one's to open. And one of my best friends, may he rest in peace, Jacob, he passed away. I think it'll be 2 years in June 2026. I've known him for about 7 years. He introduced me to my fiance. And when I got sober January of 23 for this last time, God willing, he took me to a men's stag. I flew back out to LA. I was back here in New York, flew back out to LA to get sober. I was on my ass. It was bad this time. It's like fucking 10 years of this bullshit already. I called him and he had like 6 months sober. He was in a sober living. He said, bro, when you come out here, I got you. I got some really good men's meetings with some really good recovery, all young people, some old people, but really good recovery. I said, all right, bet. I'm going to pull up on you. And he introduced me to my sponsor. And my sponsor was like, told him my story. And my sponsor was like, are you going to take the cotton balls out of your ears and put them in your mouth and shut the fuck up? And I said, yeah. And, you know, Jacob wound up putting together 6-7 months, and then he moved out of LA and went back to using, and he died from an overdose, fucking 29 years old, bro. Good kid, good family, everything great. But the demons of addiction sometimes work harder than the angels of recovery. And unless you lean into the angels, then the demons will eat you up, bro. You know? But I think about him a lot, because I'm like, holy shit, that man introduced me to the mother of my child, and that man introduced me to my sponsor, who really showed me what recovery was about. It wasn't just like, let's do a 4th step and, you know, a 5th step and make some amends and go live your life. It was like, yo, are you ready to like really change your way of thinking? Like, are you ready to like stop doing shit your way and really be in recovery? And I promise you, shit's going to get better. But like, are you ready? And I've had sponsors before, but it was soft, bro. It was very middle of the road, easy going, wishy-washy. Let's do a 4th step. Tell me your 5th step. Okay, you feel free? Okay, now you're going to feel really free. Go make some amends. And then it was just like, all right. It's like, homie, like, put me in the middle of the room even when I didn't want to be in the middle of the room. And that's because of Jacob. But yeah, bro, I'm so grateful to be back. I'm so grateful to be in recovery, not abstinent. I made an Instagram post about that a couple weeks ago. It's like, there's a big difference of being abstinent and being in recovery. Like, abstinent, I'm just getting closer to my drink. But being in recovery is like, bro, I'm free. Not every day is fucking rainbows and sunshines, but my life's good, bro. Life's really fucking good. You know, and like, I really try to help other people, not even just with this podcast shit, but I really try, and like, I see people who are suffering. I have friends who are suffering, and like, I like nudge them, like, yo, pull up to this with me. Just come check it out. Come see what it's about. You know? And for people who knew me my whole life to see me like this, they're like, yo, this is crazy. This is crazy.
It is.
You know, and I'm sure it's the same for you, but tell me about what you're doing now and kind of what the last almost 9 years have looked like for you. And I know you work in treatment. I know you help a lot of guys in treatment, but kind of what does that look like for you? And where's your art game? Where's your art game at now?
So as far as so I have 2 careers now. I'm an artist and I work in treatment. When people ask what I do, there's not really like a job title. Me and my friend Amanda, shout out to Amanda and Sammy, there's 2 women I work with. They're my dogs. When people ask what we do, we kind of joke and say, help, right? 9 months clean, that same men's meeting that I was just sharing about, my friend Chris that owns the treatment center. We've been friends for 20 years. We've been there. That's not even a friend. That's my brother, you know. He said, you ready? I was like, ready for what? He goes, some shifts. I was like, fuck yeah. Because a part that I left out in that story when I had relapsed with all that time is this is when the sober living and treatment center was starting up. So I'd never, for years, all this work I had done in the fellowship and helping people, I never thought of it as a job. And then towards the end, before I relapsed with the whole treatment, I'm like, well, I could do this, you know? And then that was part of the relapse too, that sucked, is being like, damn, I just ruined this opportunity. Fast forward 9 months clean, I take a couple shifts on as a tech. So go there nightly, well, 2 nights out of the week. Take them to a meeting, 1 night's like a UA night. After a few weeks of doing this, I started to kind of miss that when I was at the barber shop, because I had been a barber for 16 years. Right, that was my main income, was cutting hair. Here and there, I'd make art money, but not like I do now. And I realized really soon in that I was kind of wired for this, for work. You know, you're dealing with guys fresh out of jail, fresh off the street. Some guys are institutionalized. And I have a way with people. I was a barber for years, man. I mean, you're already a fucking therapist, but you fade them. You know what I mean? You're cutting their hair and talking to them. So that progressed, and I was in a relationship at the time, and she wanted to move to Florida. With blind faith, I agreed. People were like, you're going to move to Florida? I was like, yeah. They're like, what are you going to do down there? I was like, oh, I'm going to do marine construction. People were like, first of all, they go, what the fuck is that? I was like, I don't even fully know. And I'm being honest. I just knew that you're building stuff, but in and around the water. And looking back, it's pretty fucking crazy, man. And 2018, I got on a plane after working in treatment and being a barber for all this time. And I had no idea what I was expecting, right? But one thing I've realized in recovery, and when I'm in recovery and really like honed in on my higher power, and I'm not a religious guy, but I'm 100% spiritual, you know? And so I'm just going to give it a try. What is the worst that happens? I come back up. I go down there. I'm building docks and installing boathouses in the fucking ocean and in canals. And there's gators and fucking snakes, right? I was scared. Scared. It's the word I got. No idea how to build. And this is the life lesson that happened. When you put effort into things in life, your life will get better. When you are repetitious towards something, you will get better. And I went down there, and for 2 years, I climbed the ladder. I helped run these crews. I learned how to read blueprints. I learned how to operate machinery, drive a barge, operate boats. I was like, what the fuck? Who's this guy? I look like Crocodile Dundee with a Boston accent. Wearing a fucking straw hat, dude, straight up. Dipping and shit here and there. And, you know, that relationship started to, you know, just head towards its end. You know, we're butting heads. It was getting ugly. And that same friend, Chris, that asked me about some shifts, I'd called him one time when I was down there, one of the times, and I said, I need some help, but I don't even know what the fuck I'm even asking for. We kind of chuckled, you know, because he knew I'm not asking for like help to get clean. I'm not even asking to borrow money. I literally was like, dog, I like need your help You know, sometimes we need perspective of someone else's brain.
Yeah.
How do I get out of this? He talked to his wife, who was pregnant with their third kid at the time. He calls me back. He's like, Sam's down. You can fly back up. You can stay with us. Just save up. Dude. I was like, really? So now I had a plan of action. I fly up there at 40 years old with 4 years clean at the time. I'm now staying at my friend's house, right? Now I'm fully working in treatment. It was almost 2 years to the day of that flight that I took to go down there to do marine construction. I think it was off by 1 or 2 days. I land on a Monday. I'm running group by Tuesday. I'm overseeing sober living. I'm interacting with guys. I'm having one-on-ones. And I'm like, I felt like a kid because now I was back with purpose. So maybe it took a 2-year back step to go do something that you ain't good at, but I got good at something I wasn't good at. And that put me back into my purpose. My purpose is creating. Like I'm an artist, right? It's obvious I can paint, but I'm an artist with people. I create a message. I try to create a message of recovery. That's how I run group. And all humans, I feel like, have access to that, if we're being 100%, right? We're all meant to create. I started running group. I started helping with sober living. Took the recovery coach class. I started, getting back to meetings. I started doing this. I started to hone how I speak and carry myself, right? Because when you do it with repetition, it's going to get better. And that right there is where it transitions into me being an artist at full-time with a career in painting. I always wanted to do portraits. I always wanted to do this extravagant, different levels of artwork. But you know what? I didn't really work at doing that stuff. So I went all in. Saved up, got an apartment, got a car. Now I'm on my own. I've done all this stuff myself with the help of a friend, and I fully went into a flow state. I started creating almost every day. This was right at the tail end of the pandemic, right? So most people were staying in anyway. So I was staying in and creating. And then I just started booking these jobs. I was back from Florida, so I'm doing barbershops. I'm doing this, doing that. And I went full back in with my brand, which is Street Smart, which I had started doing T-shirts years ago because I was never good in school. I don't know if you relate with this or if you were good in school, but I really was never interested in what they were teaching me. My mom would always say, my son's not book smart, he's street smart. And that name always stuck with me. I just thought it was catchy and I liked it. So I started doing shirts. And when I come back from Florida, I said, I'm going to go back in, but I'm not going to make this just about shirts. I'm going to make that my brand. Because my meaning for street smart is, it's an education no one's willing to pay for, but it's priceless once it's obtained. Right? Most addicts have experience with that. I don't glorify the street by any means. I take what I learned with growing up in survival instinct, hustling and doing this, and flipped it into a positive. Ain't no way about it. I wake up every day. I go to the gym, take care of myself, take care of my family, try to help people, and live the message that I speak, right? Because a lot of people will go with words, but what does it look like? What do you do? Mm-hmm. I know I'm not perfect, and I speak about that. People need to hear that. So I started I don't even have like an exact moment. I just know that I started putting stuff out there in the world of what I wanted to do, but with action, right? Because manifestation isn't just sitting there and wishing that your life looked like this. It's thinking of it, getting a good feeling about it, and then putting the work in. Next thing you know, I'm booked and painting and traveling and painting portraits. And I went through an ugly stage with trying to paint stuff, where it doesn't look up to par. I guess the same goes for speaking, right? When I first started learning to speak or in recovery, I felt like I sounded like an idiot. I think we always are our worst critic. You always think you sound stupid or this, that, the other. And the truth is, fuck that voice.
Yeah.
Because to me, the most profound shit is the truth. I say that to everyone. It's not about sounding good. It's about being truthful. That's what I do. That's what my artwork looks like. I just paint what I want to paint now. I paint freely, and then that brings on these jobs where I get to create stuff that people want and add my twist to it, and life's good, man. I'm over there doing my Bob Ross every day, fucking painting. And
love that, dude.
Yeah. Guy's soothing.
You're a father.
Yep.
How old's your kid?
My son is 4. He'll be 5 in October.
God bless, bro. God bless. Life's beautiful.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about being a dad, right, is that I didn't get too into it, but I didn't have a dad, and then that negative narrative of like growing up and then trying to get clean and being like, I wonder what it would be like if I had a dad and all this stuff. Fuck all that. I ended up becoming who I needed when I was 12. So not having a dad motivated me to be a good dad. Right? I'm there for him.
Yep.
Show him the way. Be there. Potty training. Teaching him to walk. Just be there. It's not about money.
They just want us.
They want your time.
Yeah.
The relationship I'm in. Best relationship I've ever been in. Go figure. I'm a strong believer in, if you want a good relationship, you better be someone that brings something to the table. And I don't mean materialistically. I mean, I would have these train wreck of relationships growing up and over the years that were chaotic because I was willing to settle for that shit. I'm real big on in recovery. Start aiming for some stuff that makes you seem like it's out of your league. So I had to become something that was worthy of getting someone like her. Right? And It's like that in life. That's the evolution, right? The evolution of self that we do with others. We just met today. Well, we met through a mutual friend. But sometimes you meet people and you just see that they might think similar interest, right? I don't really care for surface level shit. To me, it's like wasting time. This type of stuff, having a conversation, talking about recovery, being a dad, talking about being engaged, right? That stuff interests me. Seeing another man that's going to fucking further his life, do other podcasts, I'm excited for you.
Thanks, brother.
I'm doing the same thing. So it's nice to meet someone, and within 5 minutes, you are already on a similar path. The only thing that really separates us is quite a few years. Right? And that's it.
And that you're a Red Sox fan.
Yes. But in all seriousness, some of my most dearest friends are Yankees fans. True story. Last week, took a friend that's from New York, works at the treatment center now. He came through as a client. He now works with us to the Red Sox-Yankees game. And they fucking beat us 4-1.
Sometimes it's just the way the cookie crumbles, brother. Jay, before we wrap up, one piece of advice for someone who's watching or listening right now who's still struggling, whether it's addiction or any type of adversity, what would your advice be to them?
Like the saying goes, the truth will set you free. That's not just a catchy phrase. The meaning in that is when you speak about what you're honestly going through, meaning if it's going to hit home to someone that's struggling out there. The only thing I've ever seen in my whole life that takes away the demons and the active addiction and the mental chaos is speaking about it, because that's the only way that you can get help. Isolation breeds more addiction, in my opinion. Isolation breeds more mental suffering. Speaking on it, it doesn't make it go away, but I'm closer to the solution. So if anyone's out there struggling with mental health, active addiction, because that's a big part. People are on social media and watching stuff like this sometimes that are still in active use. Reach out. Be honest. I told you before, and I say it in group, and I say it almost anytime I speak, the most profound shit is the truth. So be profound for yourself and speak out and say that you're struggling.
Amen, bro. I appreciate you coming on, Jay. And I'm going to attach Jay's social media accounts in the description of this episode. Again, bro, I loved our conversation today. I love you like a brother now, and looking forward to growing our relationship and staying in touch, and my best to you.
Thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir.